Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to dive into a chilling true crime story. This is the case of George and Jennifer Smith, a tale that unfolds against the backdrop of the serene Aegean Sea, where the horizon seems endless and the waters stretch all the way to the sky. The Royal Caribbean cruise ship was the setting for George Smith and Jennifer, a young couple who had just embarked on their journey as husband and wife. As they stood on the deck, feeling the wind in their hair and marveling at the majestic expanse of the sea, their wedding trip held the promise of a new beginning. But what started as a dream voyage quickly turned into a nightmarish mystery. On July 5, 2005, at around 8 a.m., 16-year-old Emily Rausch from Chicago was preparing for a sunny day in her cabin on Deck 7 of the Royal Caribbean. As she gazed out her window, something unusual caught her eye. Blood smeared across the canopy that shielded a nearby lifeboat, with a blood stain perilously close to the edge. Alarmed, Emily reported her discovery to the ship's staff, and soon, the entire deck was abuzz with frightened whispers. Just days after the newlyweds had set sail on their Mediterranean honeymoon, their happiness was abruptly shattered. The mystery centered around cabin number 962, and the versions of events ranged from a tragic accident to a robbery gone wrong, or even a premeditated murder. The investigation that ensued became a complex puzzle for the authorities. George Smith was a cheerful, inquisitive young man from Greenwich, Connecticut. He had a close-knit family, with his father, George Smith Sr., running a liquor store that was more than just a job. It was a family passion. After graduating from Babson College with a degree in business, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst. But his heart was always set on returning home to help with the family business. In 2002, George met Jennifer, a bright and beautiful elementary school teacher, and they quickly fell in love. 3 years later, they decided to get married. Their wedding at the Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, was a picturesque affair, and they soon embarked on their honeymoon, a luxurious 12-day cruise through the Aegean Sea, starting from Barcelona on June 29th. Aboard the Royal Caribbean, George and Jennifer made fast friends with another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh, with his keen sense of humor, quickly became close to George. On July 4th, after a day of exploring the island of Mykonos, the group spent the evening on the ship, enjoying drinks and games in the casino. The last footage of George was captured around 2:30 a.m. by one of the ship's security cameras, showing him leaving the casino. But that wasn't the end of his night. As dawn broke on July 5th, the mysterious events began to unfold. Emily Rausch's alarming discovery of bloodstains was the first indication that something had gone terribly wrong. The ship's captain and crew sprang into action, cordoning off Deck 7 and thoroughly searching every nook and cranny. Jennifer was found later that morning in the ship's spa, oblivious to her husband's whereabouts. She claimed not to have seen him since the previous night and was unaware of the bloodstains. By noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to begin their investigation. Jennifer's apparent lack of knowledge about George's disappearance made her a primary suspect. She recounted that George had spent the night with friends and was not in their cabin when she woke up, so she proceeded to her spa appointment as planned. The investigation revealed a chaotic scene in cabin 962. Bloodstains on the sheets, carpet, and balcony railing suggested a violent struggle. The blood samples matched George's, pointing to a grim conclusion. A chair on the balcony was found positioned near the railing, raising suspicions that George might have fallen or been pushed overboard. Witnesses reported seeing Jennifer and George intoxicated the night before. Some even mentioned a possible conflict between the couple. The investigation was complicated by the testimonies of their friends, including Josh Askin, whose accounts were inconsistent and raised further questions. As the authorities pieced together the events of that fateful night, the story grew darker and more tangled. What really happened to George Smith remains a haunting mystery, with every detail adding another layer to the puzzle. As the investigation into George Smith's disappearance intensified, the ship's crew and passengers found themselves thrust into a web of suspicion and fear. Turkish authorities began questioning everyone who had interacted with George and Jennifer that night, trying to piece together a coherent narrative from a sea of conflicting testimonies. Jennifer's apparent detachment and lack of information about George's whereabouts were puzzling. She insisted she had last seen George late the previous night when they were out with friends. She mentioned that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had shown up at her door, telling her that her husband might have fallen overboard. This only deepened the mystery surrounding George's disappearance. Cabin 962, where George and Jennifer had stayed, was a mess. Small drops of blood were found on the carpet and towel in the bathroom, and there were noticeable fingerprints on the balcony railing. These clues pointed to a violent incident, possibly a struggle, occurring inside the cabin. The presence of blood on the boat's awning below suggested that George might have fallen, or been pushed, from the balcony. Investigators began reconstructing the timeline of the night, starting with the couple's activities in the casino. Security footage showed George and Jennifer enjoying themselves at the poker and craps tables. Witnesses reported that the couple had been drinking heavily, and their behavior became increasingly erratic as the night wore on. Around 2:30 a.m., George was seen on camera leaving the casino, accompanied by Josh Askin and other friends. The group, visibly intoxicated, decided to continue their night out at the ship's disco. Witnesses described a lively scene, with the friends dancing, laughing, and consuming more alcohol. Jennifer, who had been relatively sober at the start of the night, began to show signs of heavy intoxication. She was seen staggering and at one point leaned on Lloyd Botha, the casino manager. Her behavior sparked various interpretations. Some saw it as an attempt to keep her balance, while others perceived it as flirtatious. According to witnesses, a conflict erupted between George and Jennifer at the disco. It wasn't clear whether it was a playful argument or something more serious, but at one point, Jennifer reportedly slapped George. She then left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling down the hallway. A ship janitor noticed Jennifer's unsteady walk and helped her to the elevator. Strangely, instead of heading to her stateroom, she turned in the opposite direction and was later found sleeping in a hallway far from her cabin. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to take her back to her quarters, where she was placed in bed at 4:52 a.m. However, George was not there. At the same time, other passengers reported hearing loud noises and an argument from cabin 962. Chit Hyman, a deputy chief of police staying in a neighboring cabin, called guest services to report the disturbance. He also knocked on the wall and shouted for quiet, which momentarily silenced the noise. But soon after, he heard loud talking again, followed by sounds of furniture being moved and a loud thud. Hyman decided to investigate and saw 3 men he couldn't identify leaving the cabin. Other passengers later reported hearing a loud noise like a body hitting the canopy below, followed by a woman's scream. Yet, no one could confirm seeing a woman in the cabin at that time. The investigation also focused on the group of friends who had been with George and Jennifer that night. Josh Askin's testimony was particularly inconsistent. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with Lloyd Botha, suggesting a romantic involvement between them. However, security footage showed Jennifer stumbling away alone at 3:30 a.m., while Botha's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m. The testimonies of the other friends, including Greg Rosenberg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman, added further complications. They admitted to drinking heavily and mentioned that they had brought a bottle of absinthe on board, which they consumed in the early morning hours. This absinthe, with an unusually high alcohol concentration, could have contributed to the group's intoxicated state. Despite their intoxication, the friends' accounts of the night's events varied. Some claimed they helped George back to his cabin and left him there alone, while others suggested he might have continued drinking elsewhere on the ship. The inconsistencies in their stories made it difficult for investigators to establish a clear timeline. As the authorities delved deeper, it became evident that the young men, including Josh, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, were hiding something. Josh's failed polygraph test added to the suspicion, suggesting he might know more about George's disappearance than he was willing to admit. The Royal Caribbean ship became a floating crime scene, with each new detail adding layers of complexity to the mystery. The Smith family's search for answers intensified, their hopes pinned on the investigation uncovering the truth about what happened to George that fateful night. As the investigation into George Smith's mysterious disappearance continued, the focus shifted to the testimonies of the young men who had spent the night with him. The inconsistencies in their accounts and the failed polygraph test by Josh Eskin raised serious doubts. The Royal Caribbean ship was now not just a vacation spot, but a place where a potential crime had occurred, and everyone on board became part of the unfolding mystery. Greg Rosenberg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman, along with Josh Eskin, were the last people seen with George. They admitted to drinking heavily and revealed they had smuggled a bottle of absinthe aboard, which they consumed after the casino closed. The high alcohol content of the absinthe could have exacerbated their intoxication, leading to erratic behavior and potentially clouding their memories of the night's events. Security footage and witness testimonies placed the group together until the early hours of July 5th. They described a chaotic scene: dancing, laughter, and an eventual argument between George and Jennifer. Some accounts suggested that after Jennifer left, George continued drinking with his friends, while others claimed he had returned to his cabin. Investigators faced a challenging task, piecing together fragmented and often contradictory statements. Josh Eskin's testimony was particularly problematic. He asserted that Jennifer left with Lloyd Botha, the casino manager, implying a romantic entanglement. However, security footage and Botha's key card data contradicted this, showing Botha returning to his cabin before Jennifer was last seen stumbling away alone. The janitor who helped Jennifer to the elevator confirmed seeing her in a highly intoxicated state. He described how she turned in the wrong direction and ended up sleeping in a hallway, far from her cabin. This strange detail added another layer of confusion. Why would Jennifer, disoriented and drunk, end up so far from her room? The guards who eventually returned her to her cabin found her unresponsive, raising questions about her level of intoxication and potential drug involvement. Chit Hyman's account was crucial. The deputy chief of police staying in the neighboring cabin reported hearing loud noises and a disturbance from cabin 962. His precise timeline, including the moment he heard a loud thud and saw 3 unidentified men leaving the cabin, became a central point in the investigation. The noise Hyman and others described sounded like a body hitting the canopy below, which aligned with the bloodstains discovered by Emily Rausch. Hyman's call to guest services and his pounding on the wall briefly silenced the noise, but it resumed shortly after. He and his wife heard loud talking and furniture being moved, followed by the sound of an object falling. Hyman opened his door and saw 3 men exiting George and Jennifer's cabin, raising the possibility of a violent altercation. Witnesses' testimonies about the group's behavior were inconsistent. Some claimed George was too drunk to stand, while others suggested he was still actively drinking and socializing. The janitor's testimony about Jennifer's direction and the guard's account of finding her in a hallway far from her cabin pointed to severe intoxication or potential drugging. As investigators scrutinized the events of that night, they considered several theories. One was that George might have accidentally fallen overboard due to intoxication. The positioning of the chair on the balcony and the bloodstains on the railing suggested he might have climbed onto the railing and lost his balance. However, the presence of multiple bloodstains inside the cabin hinted at a struggle or an attack before he went overboard. Another theory was robbery. Witnesses mentioned that George and Jennifer had openly discussed their winnings and the money they had with them. Their affluent appearance, marked by George's expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer's engagement ring, could have made them targets. The ransacked state of their cabin suggested someone might have been searching for valuables. The polygraph tests added to the complexity. While Jennifer and Lloyd Botha passed, Josh Eskin failed, raising suspicions about his involvement. The FBI's interest in the case deepened, with agents re-interviewing the young men and examining the security footage frame by frame. Further complicating the investigation was a videotape found among the group's belongings. The tape showed Josh Eskin and the Rosenberg cousins making dark jokes about George's fate. One chilling comment, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," hinted at foul play. This piece of evidence suggested a morbid sense of humor or possibly a veiled confession. In 2009, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in an unrelated incident, adding another tragic twist. His death remained unsolved, but investigators speculated on a possible connection to George's disappearance. considering Greg's role in the events of that night. As the investigation dragged on, the Smith family grew increasingly frustrated. Their persistent calls for justice and truth led to the case being transferred from the FBI's Connecticut regional office to its New York office. The family offered a substantial reward for information and publicly pressured the cruise line, accusing it of trying to cover. The transfer of George Smith's case to the FBI's New York office marked a turning point. The Smith family, driven by their unwavering quest for answers, intensified their efforts to keep the investigation in the public eye. They offered a $100,000 reward for information and urged a boycott of the cruise line, suspecting a cover-up. The FBI agents in New York took a fresh approach, meticulously re-examining every piece of evidence and testimony. They focused on the night of George's disappearance, aiming to reconstruct the events leading up to his mysterious fall. The key players, Josh Askin, Greg Rosenberg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman, were re-interviewed. Their testimonies remained inconsistent, casting a shadow of doubt over their version of events. The videotape found among their belongings, with its disturbing joke about paragliding without a parachute, became a crucial piece of evidence. It hinted at a deeper involvement in George's fate, either as a morbid joke or a veiled confession. The FBI agents scrutinized the tape, hoping to glean any additional information that could shed light on the incident. Henry Lee, an independent forensic scientist enlisted by the Smith family, conducted his own investigations. He examined the cabin, the balcony, and the boat's canopy, aiming to determine whether George's fall was accidental or the result of foul play. Lee's findings raised more questions than answers. The height of the balcony made an accidental fall unlikely, suggesting that George might have been pushed. Lee's attempt to conduct a reenactment of the fall was thwarted by the cruise line, which refused access. This refusal fueled the Smith family's suspicions of a cover-up. They believed that the cruise line was more concerned with protecting its reputation and profits than uncovering the truth. Jennifer's behavior also came under scrutiny. Her apparent detachment and decision to settle the lawsuit independently for $1 million caused a rift with the Smith family. They viewed her actions as a betrayal, suspecting that she knew more than she let on. Jennifer, on the other hand, claimed she was following FBI instructions and doing only what she was told. She insisted that she remembered little from the night after 2:30 a.m., a statement that did little to allay the family's suspicions. The Turkish authorities' investigation had left many questions unanswered. The Smith family, dissatisfied with the official findings, pressed for further inquiry. The case's transfer to the FBI brought hope, but the investigation remained complex and fraught with obstacles. The FBI's focus on the young men who had been with George that night revealed a tangled web of relationships and conflicting interests. Josh Askin's failed polygraph test indicated that he might be hiding something, but it was unclear what. The videotape, while suggestive, did not provide concrete evidence of foul play. The investigation's findings pointed to two main theories: murder or accident. The evidence was circumstantial, with no definitive proof to support either scenario. The presence of blood in the cabin and on the balcony, combined with the high railing, suggested that George could not have fallen accidentally. However, without eyewitness testimony or a confession, proving murder was challenging. The Smith family's relentless pursuit of justice eventually led to the release of the cruise line's internal investigation documents. These included witness statements and other crucial information that had been withheld. The documents revealed that the cruise line had initially downplayed the severity of the incident, furthering the family's belief in a cover-up. Despite these efforts, the investigation reached a frustrating impasse. The FBI, lacking conclusive evidence, was forced to close the case. The official statement declared George Smith's disappearance an accident, a conclusion that left many unanswered questions. Jennifer, struggling with the loss of her husband and the public scrutiny, dedicated herself to charitable work in George's memory. She eventually remarried, but the shadow of that fateful night continued to loom over her life. The Smith family, despite their grief and frustration, remained hopeful that someday the truth would emerge. The case of George Smith's disappearance remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in true crime history. The unanswered questions, conflicting testimonies, and the possibility of a cover-up have kept the case in the public's consciousness. The Smith family's search for closure continues, as they hold on to the hope that one day, the full truth will be revealed. Thank you for watching the story of George and Jennifer Smith. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories. There are many more shocking tales ahead.